Okay, so start recording. I share my screen now. Okay, so we are going to wrap up the chapter 7 for viral detection. So we talk about a few different methods, including viral culture. We talk about nucleic acid base, so means PCR or some isothermal amplification. Last lecture, we talk about how do we do that, and also discuss some of the limitations for each technique. But more recent, even in today's news, we still see a lot of discussion in terms of something called antibody test or this serological test. And if you look into, it's actually people has been discussed quite a while, but I think yesterday, Dr. Anthony Fauci actually also kind of make some comments about that. A lot of hope about using that. What exactly is that they're talking about? So one of the ideas is instead of detecting the pathogens, means the virus or some of the viral antigens. So they say, or maybe we can detect some of the antibody in the host response in our body. That could potentially give us a way to track coronavirus infection. So the idea of this approach is by looking at the antibodies we are making in our body, we may be able to tell whether you are recently infected by this virus, or whether you have had that infection before. Means so because for COVID-19, one of the particular tricky thing is people find that a lot of patients, a lot of people, they may not show any symptoms. They may not have a fever. They may not be coughing a lot. They may not look very sick, but they may actually have that virus. That's number one thing. If we can pick up those groups, that will be very powerful in terms of how we track and kind of quarantine all these people. Another thing is we also want to know how many people got infected. As we mentioned, because people may not show a symptom, means after they recover from the disease, they don't even realize they actually have that disease. They just feel, or maybe I just don't feel sick for a few days, but they don't realize they actually have COVID-19. So that's why having antibodies can potentially be a way for us to track how many people in the community get that infection. So that they put a lot of hope in terms of whether that could be a way to tell us when can we ready to go back to school, go back to work, we can get our economy open up again. And so it's not the different people have been discussing about that. So one of the important concepts is that our body actually in our immune system, we actually make different antibodies, including something called IgM and also some IgG. Those are basically substance or kind of antibodies made by our body's immune system. Usually the purpose is really to help us to fight different type of infections. And so the idea for this test is instead of detecting the viral particle, the nucleic acid, the RNA, or the antigen, we try to look for this antibody for a specific viral infection. So typically it's done on a blood sample, means we will do a blood draw, or maybe even some of the claim they can do a finger prick, some small blood from your finger. If they see antibody, they would tell whether you actually recently got that infection, if you show IgM, or you have that in the past. That's probably look from the IgG. So if you see IgG, you don't see IgM, probably you had that infection before, but not now. But you see IgM, probably you're currently having that infection. So of course, it's all kind of a time-related issue. So there are different ways for us to detect antibody. So one of the most talked about approach is actually doing something called lateral flow immunoassay. So the idea is to do kind of a qualitative detection to see whether you have or you don't have that antibody. And again, by differentiation of IgG and IgM, you may be able to tell when are you in that disease cycle. So there's a lot of discussion you probably see in the news. They kind of doing, so FDA already approved one of the COVID-19 antibody tests already. but they talk about more, actually many companies actually working on things like this. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how those things work. So this is a company website that I found that kind of doing basically their COVID-19 antibody test. It's not the one FDA approved, but that's one give a good image to show how it works. That's why I think it's a good idea to maybe to show this as an example. It's really kind of a truly handheld small device. So the actual device is actually the white things you see here. As you can see, it's actually pretty small. You have kind of little drop of solution. So what they ask you to do is you have to pick a finger and then you draw some of this blood using a kind of disposable pipette. After you draw this blood, you actually load this blood into the device. So if you, this is kind of the picture of that device. And after you load the blood in, so you add kind of a drop of this buffer solution. So after that, you will be basically wait. So depends on the test. Some of the company claim they can do in a few minutes. Some say 10 to 15. Some actually say even less than a minute. I can see all kind of number everywhere. But exactly what happened is you basically want to see after you load this buffer solution. If you are a truly negative patient, so it means you really don't expose to COVID-19 before, so you will see only one red line. So C actually represent control. We are dealing with the situation that, yes, we know the liquid, the solution going in, that's why we have the control line showing up. If you don't even see the control line, means something wrong when you run this assay. That's why all of them, no matter what situation, you should always see that control line. And you may see IgM test, the positive, means you actually recently got infected, so that you show the IgM. You may see only IgG, so that indicate you you had that before, but you currently probably not a carrier. So, but you may actually show both of them. That means that you are probably in the depends on the antibody response. You're in the situation you have both. So that's possible, and so that's kind of the idea. So that's why it's kind of truly a nice device that you really don't need to have a lot of complicated equipment. And so let's talk a little bit more about how those things work. In fact, this type of literal flow test is exactly the same technology they use in patency tests. So literal flow test is based on this liquid drive into this cellulose or paper-like material, because the capillary force is drive the solution in. So what happens is usually you come with some analytes. So that's something you want to detect. The solution, like the blood or maybe the buffer solution that you add in that in the product. So we actually wash all the antibody, maybe some label by capillary flow to some of the detection line. So again, you always want to see a control line to make sure the liquid actually get all the way through the test strip. You go to the, but there's usually an antibody, so that you have to kind of detect. So it depends on you are positive for that particular antigens or the antibody that you want to detect. So you may accumulate some of this indicator. So in this case, usually they use a gold nanoparticle, because when they aggregate, they actually give you that strong red color, the red line that you're seeing. So that's kind of the principle of literal flow test. Let me try to show you the video of how this works. So this one. So I hope that this gives you kind of a visualization of how things like this work. Yeah, so at the end, it's really a standalone device that you can simply load the solution in. You may add a buffer, but at the end, you don't need any external equipment to support. You may at most using a app or cell phone to kind of capture the result. But it's really like a pregnancy test. You can actually take it and then use it at home. So that's something quite easy compared to a lot of other testing approach we discussed before. So of course, literal flow test is not the only approach. A similar or related one is actually ELISA. We also discussed that when we talk about viral antigen. So again, the idea is you have specific antibody that you can capture the target you want. So in this case, if you want to detect that antibody, you can actually use the viral antigen. If you have a way to, because we know the sequence, that in principle you can express those proteins you like, and that potentially give us a way. Again, you can use ELISA to detect antibody as well. That's something we already discussed last time, but I just want to mention. It's not the only way, but of course ELISA is a more sensitive way in a sense because of we use the HRP, the enzyme, to amplify the signal. But in principle, yeah, any protein detection method we can potentially use to look at this antibody for the antibody test, this serological test. So one of the important things we may want to discuss is this truly a better solution or cheaper solution for this one? One of the things we can, if we ever use a pregnancy test, we know that something actually can be quite cheap. Because at the end, it's pretty much a piece of paper, and then you bind it with kind of a housing, a plastic housing. You can simply go to the pharmacy to buy some of this off the shelf, and a pregnancy test for this one I found is for 2 tests for only $12. Means you can actually buy $6 or $7 a piece. You can take it home and do the test at your convenience. So that's kind of how cheap can those things be. Of course, they're more fancy one, more powerful one. So, for example, for this one is actually for influenza. They actually have a version of kind of this test strip for influenza. They actually running up immunoassay. So, but you can see for 30 tests. So this one, it can be a little bit more expensive. They talk about something like $420. Means each test is still like $10, $15 or something like that. So whether it's but again, this thing is a potential. You can run it everywhere, and so that really kind of really does not require any complicated equipment. It does not require tissue culture facility. It does not require a fancy PCR machine. So that's why there's a lot of hope to use this antibody test as a way to screen who have or who had COVID-19 before, because it's a truly point of care device. So that's one of the things you may want to consider. But so in fact, they already kind of approved at least one so far I realized, I'm aware of, is there's only one test. They actually get emergency use authorization from FDA. So they actually have other, they kind of basically allow them to ship around, and then I think they're evaluating, probably will see a lot more coming to the market to be available for at least emergency use authorization. So, but they also kind of talk about some of the potential issues of doing antibody tests. I think there's at least a couple considerations. One is it actually depends on how our immune response to any viral infection. So I kind of picked a couple examples. So this is Zika virus, this is the Varicella virus. So one of the things we should realize, all the viruses, they can behave differently. Our immune response also behave differently. In fact, if you look at COVID-19, you see patients have very diverse situations. Some of them don't even realize they have the disease, but some of them get really, really sick. They have to go to the ICU, they do ventilator and everything. So, but even within different type of virus, you see our immune response can be quite different. For example, for Zika virus, from the time you actually get the virus and then to see IgM or IgG, so there could be actually a time delay. You may not immediately have that antibody. You may see at some points IgG, IgM, then later on you see IgG, but after a while IgG will come down. But if you compare that to maybe another virus, so this curve, the time scale can be totally different. Means what for Zika virus, if I pick up, I do a test in the early phase, I may not see any detectable IgG or IgM. So then I will consider, oh, this patient may be lactic. But actually, this patient may actually already have a significant viral load already. So this patient already have the virus. Another situation, of course, if you have one that responds really fast, and that will be nice, but it's not always the case. So what's that tell us? One of the things is this test usually the sensitivity and sensitivity can be quite different. So so for if you see the IgM, so of course that means yeah, good, you have that. But if you don't see that, there's still a good chance that it's still too early for your antibody to respond. So that's why the sensitivity is not very high, because of you may have the disease, but the test may not pick it up to see that. So that's why that can potentially be an issue. Also, I think one of the things we should realize, this graph I picked is for different virus. It's not for SARS-CoV-2. It's not for COVID-19. Because I don't think we know very well in terms of how COVID-19 induces our immune response, how the IgM, IgG, IgM going to respond. So it's still a big uncertainty. And how this curve will differ for different patients. So someone who really sick or who do not show any symptoms, how's this curve going to be? I think that again still require further study or testing to determine. So, but I think the hope is we have all the technology available first, then we can collect more and more data. We can tell how accurate this thing will be. So, so that's something to consider. Antibody test is something have a big hope. People kind of talk about that a lot, but it has its own limitation. So I think that's something we should consider. So one of the things I want to discuss a little bit is how is this going to be related to our class, right? In the class, we have been looking at we're doing all the homework, we're doing all the discussion on mostly physical phenomena. We talk about how we measure temperature, we talk about how to measure biopotential. Of course, we always need some sort of transducers. So in the class, we talk about resistive sensing or different way. So for a lot of molecular biology detection, when we measure, what we measure right now is actually viral antigen, maybe nucleic acid, maybe the host antibody. So it turns out either we do kind of cell-based assay, means that we infect the cells with some of the viruses, or we talk about some of the molecular assay, we kind of doing maybe ELISA, maybe PCR, or maybe literal flow test to detect those molecules that we're interested in, may tell us. So there are many different ways for us to do this detection. You can use a test strip, maybe the microfluidic device, maybe some other instrumentation. So how is it related to what we learned? I think for any measurement system, I think there are two things we always need to consider. One is how we amplify the signal. In the class, where we spend all the time to talk about OM, doing optical circuit, one of the main purpose, of course, is to amplify our signal. So that's what the amplifier is for. Another thing is how do we remove the noise, the background signal. That's why I talk a lot in terms of filtering, how we filter out the signal that we don't want in the system using, again, some OM circuitry. So, but when we go to molecular assay, again, we still want to amplify the signal. Instead, when you infect a cell, that itself is an amplification method because of the virus can replicate by themselves. So there's some of this cell-based assay really take advantage of that. Of course, that itself is quite a slow process, such that it takes several days or weeks before we get the result. So that's why the molecular assay, when we do PCR or isothermal amplification, those are really methods for us to amplify the signal. And also, we talk about this ELISA approach is, again, a way to amplify the signal by using an enzyme that reacts with the substrate that generate a lot of products so that we can have a observable signal. So how to remove noise in kind of a molecular assay is something we kind of also mentioned a little bit in some of this example. What's the test strip? Test strip is using a antibody immobilized on the test strip. When the liquid passes, you only capture the one you want, you wash away the things you don't want. Of course, those can potentially be run by using some microfluidic device. We also talk about in the PCR case how we actually lyse the cell, how we extract the nucleic acid from the. So again, that's the thing we try to isolate, to concentrate the target molecules we want, but we want to get rid of all the noise. So unlike doing electronic filters that we can tune the frequency, so we kind of need to have some molecular recognition. So, but I think those concepts, although we talk about very different things, but some of the concepts we actually learn in Fall 2 are also applicable to some of this molecular detection assay. So that's another thing I think is quite important or interesting to think about. So, but I also like to mention a little bit of the 4 methods I discussed so far are kind of more like existing methods. So people are using that, people already can do it. The question is how fast we can commercialize. We can make those products available. We can verify the accuracy, the safety of using those devices. But for you guys will become biomedical engineers. Probably in the next few years, there will be more technology or more companies that want to develop new technology that will allow us to quickly handle outbreaks like this. So at least I want to mention at least a couple of the technologies that may potentially be something you should think about, that may potentially be useful in the future in handling outbreaks or other medical detection. So one of the I think we should all aware of is called Nextgen Sequencing. So why don't we have technology to quickly sequence a piece of DNA or RNA or a lot of RNA, DNA at the same time? That's called Nextgen Sequencing. There are actually many technologies to do that, but one of them I would like to highlight is this called asphalt nanopore technology. They have this mean iron technology. It's kind of actually, this device is actually, how big it is? It's definitely smaller than your cell phone. It's something that you can pop it into the device, put it into the system, and for sequencing. So it's truly a portable real-time device for DNA, RNA sequencing. So the idea for this technology is actually based on a motor protein. So when you drive the nucleic acid through the, so when they drive this DNA through the motor protein, by looking at so they actually apply a potential across it. By looking at the ion passing through this one, which is affected by the DNA molecules. So it turns out by looking at the current at a certain time point, you will actually be able to tell what bases, so ACGT, CCGT, so what are passing through that motor protein at that time point. So that eventually gives us a way to quickly determine the sequence of that DNA molecules. So let me show you the movie, and you'll see how visualize a little bit more what it does.
Nanopore sequencing enables users to produce ultra-long DNA or RNA reads in real time. The technology works by passing a current across electrically resistant membranes into which protein nanopores are embedded. As DNA or RNA move through the nanopores, they cause disruption in the current, which can be analyzed to determine the sequence of bases. The MinION is a palm-sized sequencing device containing a consumable flow cell to which the sample is added. The flow cell contains a sensor that detects the characteristic nanopore signal as the molecule is analyzed. Each MinION flow cell has 512 nanopore channels available to be sequencing simultaneously. Users have achieved as much as 30 gigabases of sequence data per flow cell, making it ideal for any application, from microbiology, metagenomics, RNA and cDNA analysis, up to whole genome sequencing. The MinION is easy to use and can be connected to a laptop or the companion analysis device MinIT, making it suitable for use in the lab or out in the field. Library preparation is a straightforward process, which applies across all devices and can be performed manually with Oxford Nanopore kits or with an automated library preparation device. Minno, the MinION control software, can also be run off either a laptop or MinIT, allowing you to gain real-time insight into the progress of your samples and your sequencing run. Minno performs local base calling to produce FastQ files that can then be taken on for analysis either through epitome workflows provided by Oxford Nanopore Technologies or individuals' analytical pipelines. The long reads produced using a MinION provide a more unambiguous approach to mapping a DNA or RNA sequence, enabling much simpler assembly. With long reads, you can build a clearer picture when it comes to more complex regions, such as repeats and structural variation, while sequencing directly enables the detection of base modifications and methylation without additional preparation steps. MinION starter packs are available from $1,000, providing everything you need to get going on your first nanopore experiment. Visit the store to buy today.
So let's come back to our slide. So and this kind of a platform, you see the device itself is like $1,000. Of course, it's not something you want everybody want to buy, but you can see there's actually quite interesting technology out there. Instead of doing PCR, we look at to identify the things. So you can actually get molecular information for the sequence. In fact, currently, I think there are a lot of people using different sequencing technology to kind of trace how the virus got mutated and how it evolved in different time and different location. People kind of try to understand how the virus got propagated. You probably see some of the article about that as well. So that could be one potential technology will be emerge in the future for helping us to handle some of the outbreaks like this. Another technology is actually related to some of this gene editing. At least one of the platforms that people talk about is called CRISPR Cas9. Is using is actually a enzyme that they find in bacteria, prokaryotes. It's kind of the immune system in bacteria, how they fight virus. So we have our immune system to fight virus, actually bacteria. And some of the prokaryotic cells, they also have their way. By using this case, in a sense, they actually found this could be a very powerful platform to recognize the target sequence. And so as you see, this one is actually based on a graphene technology that when the target bind to this CRISPR Cas9 protein, what happened is you actually change the conductivity of the graphene layer. Then at the end, you can actually measure that change in conductivity. So I think by now it's not a new thing for you to see a op-amp like this and to see using it as an amplifier. So let me show you the video, and again you can visualize how those things work. So, this one is from University of California.
It's tough enough to keep track of your lab inventory, even if everything is where it should be. But let's face it, Petri.
That's the advertisement. Sorry.
This small chip has the power to detect genetic mutations that cause disease and can help doctors provide better treatments, all within minutes.
Let's say you have a DNA sample from a patient and you want to make sure that that gene that you're interested in is a healthy gene. You introduce that to our device, CRISPR chip, and then CRISPR chip will start looking for the DNA.
CRISPR chip is a handheld device that combines thousands of CRISPR molecules with a graphene transistor. Researchers designed CRISPR to scan through DNA and find specific genes or mutations, while the transistor is super sensitive to electrically charged materials, like our DNA.
We introduce the DNA from the patient on top of the graphene surface in CRISPR chip. The CRISPR scans these DNAs. If CRISPR doesn't find its target gene, it won't bind to it, and the DNA is released. But if it scans and it finds its target, then it'll bind to it. And this binding will create an additional charge on top of the graphene surface, and this can be sensed with CRISPR chip. This shows you the response that we get from CRISPR chip. Here, you're looking at when we actually introduce our DNA sample and remove it from the sensor. This endpoint, if it doesn't match this initial point, that means that our CRISPR chip was able to detect gene that we programmed it to detect. This is which sample? This is a DMD sample. So far, we have tested the technology for muscular dystrophy. We are currently testing it for sickle cell disease, which is much more difficult to detect. And we are hoping to increase the sensitivity of our system to detect infectious disease as well. Our system is a few years away from being product for diagnostics, but in its current format, it can be used for many other applications. For example, it can help scientists and researchers design better CRISPR complexes when they're trying to use these complexes for gene editing.
Clinical trials are using CRISPR to edit and hopefully cure genetic disease. But researchers must first test whether the CRISPR molecule they design will find and edit the mutated gene and not a healthy gene nearby. With CRISPR chip, they could test this faster than ever before. In the future, researchers imagine a chip that can scan multiple mutations simultaneously.
I'm very excited about being able to use the power of CRISPR with digital devices. This will enable us to do a lot of things that we were not able to do before.
All right, so let's come back to our thing. So I guess the two technology. The first one is this Oxford nanopore basically measure the current going through a nanopore to do sequencing. The second one is this CRISPR chip. So that based on the binding of the DNA. So they actually can have to kind of detect the specific DNA that they are interested in. In fact, the example we saw in the movie, they actually talk about doing that for single base mutation, so that you can look at mutation in the DNA because of they can be both very sensitive and also selective. They can select the sequence. So this kind of example I want to discuss with you guys in terms of there are a lot of new technology that can potentially improve our, develop and improve how we handle the outbreak. While these two technologies are not ready to use, so but I think that probably will represent future opportunities for probably when you guys become engineer, you may be actually working with some of the technologies. So I think that's something good to think about. And also there are a lot of technologies that we discussed in this class. So one very true is because the cell phone is getting very more powerful, so we actually making more and more these portable, wearable, implantable devices. The question is, at what point these devices can be useful for a situation like this? In a sense, we already have all the very powerful electronics in hand. So you can see a lot of this technology can be measured using a electronic format. So you can, some of the things we learn in this class will definitely be applicable there are more things kind of this smart home, Internet of Things, and so that probably may also play a role in the future outbreak. How we going to handle that? Can we have all these tests done at home instead of everybody going to rush to the hospital or some region that risking transmit the disease to other people? But can we actually do that at home so that we can minimize for some of these issues that are associated with the current testing? And can we have the right manufacturing? We can make enough devices that we can send it to everybody, so that we can do a trace of who actually get there. If I get there, can I do a quick scan for my family members to know whether they get infected? So how should we handle the situation? As we continue to get more and more data like this, so then some of the concept about big data, AI, precision medicine will come in. So that may can help us to better manage how should we handle a outbreak like this. So I think that's why kind of a lot of things we discuss in this class can potentially be useful, and also kind of think everybody should think about and see how we as a biomedical engineer, how we can contribute to fighting such a crisis. If you want to learn more about things like this, as I mentioned, so I normally teach things like this in 410, how we do biosensing, how we do microfabrication, so how we make those devices like those test strip, microfluidic devices, some of these portable, wearable, implantable medical devices. We also talk about actually organs on chips and tissue engineering in 410. We also have some discussion on some of the drug screening and drug delivery, both using microfluidic system. We will actually talk about AI and machine learning in this class 4.2. So that's our chapter 8 right now, so we'll talk about that. But there's some additional more advanced topic I'll actually talk in 410 as well. So, but hopefully with this, will actually prepare us to better for the future when, as a biomedical engineer, how we handle different diseases or any outbreak. Because it seems like infectious diseases is something you will always need to deal with. So that's why I think, especially if you can think about what we can contribute to something, I think it will be important for us in the future. I think that's the last slides I have for today. So let me see. So let me go back to the chat room to see there's some questions people may have. They want to answer. Okay, so let me go to this one by one. Let me see. Maybe I should stop sharing first. Stop recording.